And likewise, I've
Gotcha.
had a chance to talk with Portia and Josh on the phone,
Right.
but not in person. So we're all here, but we need the applicant.
Chris Round is here. I guess maybe we're just waiting for Daniel.
Dan should be jumping in any minute.
It's a little bit ahead of time.
Here we go.
And there he is, looking distinguished with the tie. We're impressed.
Even on Zoom.
You're muted, Dan.
Yes,
Thank you. Sorry, Madam Chair. How are you?
good, thanks. How are you?
Good.
So do we have everybody? Let's see.
Is Jay still on the planning board?
Yes.
Hello,
We're-
here he is.
Oh, you are. That's who
there.
JHR is. Okay.
Yeah, JHR, because no
So
one
I
can say
think
Rice got anyway.
we have everybody, yes?
Yes.
Ashley may be joining as well in case there's any particular questions on the easements. But,
Should we
We
wait
can-
for
we can-
Ashley then? Because
I'm
it's
here.
not quite 7:30.
oh, there you are.
He's
Okay.
Usually I'm right at the top of everyone's screen because my name, so wasn't hiding.
Joshua and Portia, Ashley and I are both the attorneys for the planning board.
Got it.
Nice to meet you both.
Yes. Good to meet you.
Yeah, I guess I don't have to do the introductions on the record, or should I?
No need.
So Portia Hinshaw is a new member, as is Josh Schuer. And the other, as you're looking at faces, the other planning board members are Rich Whitty, who's on Janet's iPad, and Jay Reichgott. And then Desiree is the recording secretary. Daniel Richmond is the attorney for the Overton applicant, and Chris Round is the engineer, and Rick and Ashley are the counsel to the village planning board, and I'm Joanne Hanson, the chair. And John Ledwith is the village building inspector, and Meg, I guess, is a member of the public. So shall we officially start the meeting then, Desiree?
Yes.
The application is an extension of the subdivision approval for the Overton property. And I had asked for the benefit of the new planning board members for Dan just to briefly review what the Overton application is and kind of where we are. There's some remaining, not too many pieces, which need to be completed before the subdivision is formally approved. And with that, I will turn it over to Dan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And good
I'm
evening.
sorry, Daniel, if I can interrupt just 1 minute.
Absolutely.
Do we need to be recording this as well as having Desiree taking notes? Do we have to push that little button to actually record the session?
The session should,
It is being recorded on Zoom.
Okay, very good. Sorry, it just doesn't show up on my little screen. All right. Sorry about that.
and before you get started as well, I'll also interrupt. Dan, is there any way, especially for the two new members, that Chris can share his screen to show at least the general site plan layout of this subdivision?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
So
that's what-
I'll ask that permission now. You gotta let me do that, I guess. I don't know if John's running the show.
I think I've already set that up. You should be able to share your screen. If not, let me know. There you
You
go.
seeing that?
Yes.
Seeing
Yes.
the plan. So this is just if I might, Dan, this is just a site location map, just to orient folks, because the new folks and subdivisions outlined in red west of the lake and bounded, by almost by the village town line and Camp Comfort and Mountain Farm Road. And And we have some site plans that I'll share with you, but I'll let Dan make the introductions and I'll open up that drawing.
No, Chris, I mean, go ahead. I mean, as by way of background, project has been the product of long and careful review by your board until finally we did receive approval from it on August 7th, 2019, which came with some conditions, which we believe we have almost entirely satisfied. The one real outstanding issue that we're still trying to nail down is, as Chris will explain, this project, there are timber rattlesnakes in the area. As a result of that, we need an incidental take permit from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. We've been throughout much of this project's history involved in detailed discussions with DEC about the requirements of that, including the creation of resource protection areas, which Chris will show you shortly after he gives you an overview of the subdivision. We believe we are extremely close. I attached an email that we sent to them to the letter requesting this extension, which they indicated that there was just one minor change to an implementation agreement and another change to a doc that they were looking for. We have already made those changes. We have submitted them to DEC and have been consistently continuing to follow up with them. And this afternoon, we did receive an email from department staff that's saying that they believe that's it. And then once technical staff confirms this, we should get a notice of complete application within a week. There are some brief noticing requirements attendant to that, which shouldn't take long. And we are cautiously optimistic, but I'm knocking on wood because I've said this, I think, to this board for some time, that we really think the DEC permit should be forthcoming shortly.
And
I'll hand it over to, sorry.
If I could just interrupt, just to do a little bit of framing. I think people may recognize this map, but this is essentially the property that surrounds the Park School. So people know, and Chris can go on and explain the.
Yeah, so just a couple figures. This is something to help people orient themselves. This was a figure that appeared in the EIS as well as our permit application to DEC. And here, if you can see my cursor, this is the school here. Access to the school comes in through here. And the school was actually a part of the parent parcel prior, some 30 years ago, 40 years ago, where the current landowner, John Overton, his predecessors gifted the land and allowed formation of the school. The subdivision is a creation of 9 lots. They're numbered on this figure. This is just an easy figure to look at, and I'll show you the subdivision plan. But it is 9 lots. 4 of those lots are going to gain access from an existing carriage road that would be improved to village standards, and that's these lots in this area. And what this image is conceptually just shows a building placement and then area of disturbance. And the area of disturbance, we've, as Dan mentioned, we've gone through a rigorous process, is that we've tried to control and minimize site impacts. The planning board and the design review process is really very sensitive to the project, to the impacts to the landscape. And so this shows that, and I'm just going to flash to the subdivision plan itself. This is the existing conditions plan. So this is a topographic map that shows the site prior to subdivision. I mentioned this carriage road. This is the intersection of Camp Comfort and Mountain Farm here, where you can see my cursor. And there's a formal gate, stone arch entrance here, and that's how this carriage road preserves that, or excuse me, the entrance preserves that entrance, and that carriage road, the access point would be constructed on that carriage road. So this shows the existing school, and for benefit, the site bounded by the road nearly on 3 sides. There are 2 existing home sites within the kind of the context of this kind of campus, the Garofano and the McKinnon properties. And this is the McKinnon property here, and this is the Garofano property here that always comes up during conversation, and then headmaster's house and ancillary facilities. And so I'm just going to scroll to the next drawing so you can see that. Bear with me. This is, a rather complex figure, but it is the official subdivision plan, and the subdivision plan depicts each of the lots, meets and bounds on those lots. Mr. Golden mentioned easements. There are a series of easements that are being granted for existing utilities that are in place. So the site is crisscrossed by existing water and sewer facilities. And so we're providing easements for that purpose. We're also providing easements for new water and sewer facilities. And then there's some, and I won't get too down into the weeds, but there's some other things. And the boxes on here, the village has this unique zoning compliance requirement that we show what they call inscribed squares, which show the areas with which you could construct a home in. And so this plan shows all that. Dan mentioned, and I can come back to any of these figures, but Dan mentioned a figure that is part and parcel of our incidental take permit. And Dan mentioned the incidental take permit, we anticipate it's going to be found complete. And that's kind of a confusing statement, because we have gone through 2 years of negotiations and providing information to the DEC to satisfy the conditions by which they would issue a permit. And so when they say complete, there'll be a public notice process, and there will be a public comment, and we expect that the permit would be issued. Even though it's complete, we expect that it's going to be issued in the form that it's written today. And we've copied the village with all this information. So what the important issue or information that this particular map presents is this shaded area. And I apologize, there's 2 shaded areas, but this shaded area here that's shown here, and throughout this area, and then there's some overlapping shading here. These are areas that are going to be protected by deed restrictions or covenants that will basically prohibit any physical development activity within these particular geographies. And you can see that they're quite substantial. And the goal there is the DEC is concerned that, well, the habitat is not particularly unique on this site or particularly important to the rattlesnake, but the fact that the idea is to limit disturbance, limit human and snake interactions, and avoid disruption. And this map is basically, this is a part of the incidental take permit and shows those restricted areas. Dan and your attorneys have been working through language that speaks to the conditions of in the covenants and restrictions, and we spent a considerable amount of time going back and forth on that. So this map shows that, and I think it shows how significant amount of area that is protected, as a part of this this program. Dan mentioned there's a series of conditions that we still need to work through, and or we've largely satisfied. One of those was Department of Health approval. One of the planning board's principal concerns, or the village's principal concerns, were impacts and capacity of the water and sewer systems. And so we've done extensive engineering analysis, and we were issued Orange County Department of Health approval for those water system improvements. The wastewater system improvements have received basically design approval, but we have to address what they call infiltration and inflow. The village wastewater treatment plant is at capacity, or at times exceeds capacity. So what we need to do is we need to offset our wastewater flow in order to allow for additional receiving capacity at the wastewater treatment plant. And we need to offset that 3 times, basically a multiplier of 3 times. So we have to offset wastewater flow volumes that are triple that which we would contribute to the system. Really important, and perhaps last but not least, is that any development on this subdivision plan is going to be subject to site plan review, is going to come back in front of the planning board. And while we produced what we would consider model site plans with a significant level of detail showing grading, building placement, landscaping, etc., all those plans are going to be subject to the planning board's review and approval. And I'd maybe like to leave it at that. I don't know, Rick, if there's something that you would like us to highlight or augment, and we can answer any questions.
Chris did an excellent job of summarizing a very complicated or complex anyway review period that has gone over many years. So I very much commend him for that. And when Joanne wants to, she can open it up for questions. But the only other thing that, by the planning board, the only other thing that I would add, because it's very important, is that when Chris talked about the long cul-de-sac that was the current carriage road, that's going to be built, as he said, to village standards, but it is not going to be a village road. It's going to be a private road. And the reason for that is that if it were a public offered for dedication, which Overton was willing to do, if it was offered for dedication to the village and the village accepted it, it then would be a truly public road open to the entire public outside of the village. And therefore, anybody wanting to visit that area could travel along the village's road and be allowed access through the gate. As you, the two new members probably know, there is special protections given the village that's really virtually no place else in New York State, that are village roads, but are not generally open to the public outside of the village. So that is the reason that this is going to stay private, but it will be built to village standards.
And if I could just add that the Rattlesnake Dens homes are not on village land. They're actually in the state park, but these are territories through which they travel. So
Important point. Thank you.
if there are any questions that folks would, and I should say that, you know, that this is, the applicant has been through a very extensive, and if you want to see them, they're down at the village office, like environmental impact review process. So as the applicant's attorney, as Dan has said, we're right at the tying up the last small pieces, but I'm happy to have folks ask questions to understand the overall project.
It's Josh Schurer. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So, by the way, that was an excellent summary. I was afraid looking at those maps that I was going to have no idea what you were talking about, but I think I have come away with a decent understanding of the situation. One question I had for you is about that wastewater flow offset. How do you do that? What is the offset?
If I could say that that's in the process of still being discussed with the village.
Okay.
And worked out. So that is not, Paul Gluck has been working on that as a village trustee, but that's in progress as we speak.
If I might, we actually have a call with John and your village engineer to revisit some of the options that we're considering, but in a simple form, Josh, water, both stormwater and surface water and groundwater, are entering the village's pipes, right? And so they're either, because of age, they're cracked. And so what we need to do is we need to repair those cracks to eliminate that infiltration and inflow. And it's other, besides cracks, it might be other engineering measures. And in order to do that, we need to quantify that. And so we need to quantify it before we conduct the work, and then quantify it after we conduct the work, and so that the village can be assured that, and the DEC is going to need to sign, in addition to the village, the DEC is going to need to sign off on it. They'll say, yes, you've satisfied this particular condition. And so that's not, and correct me if I'm wrong, folks, it's not necessarily a condition of subdivision. It's a subdivision approval condition. But it's a condition that needs to be satisfied before any building permit or any construction activity can be undertaken. So there's some leeway in a sense to.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I've always wondered where those gates led to.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a question if you can hear me.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, you said the carriage road basically will go into 4 lots. And how do you get to the other 5?
Those lots are accessed by existing frontage. So these 2 lots, lots 8 and 9, have frontage on Camp Comfort as example. And I'm scrolling up, I apologize. Lot 5 has frontage on Mountain Farm. You can see here.
Mhm.
And then there's a lot 2 that has frontage on this Ivy Road. And
Okay.
it's here.
Okay.
And the final lots on Mountain Farm.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And do you need some agreements with some people about
Yeah.
maintenance and things like that?
The only agreement we're required is on Ivy Road, as Chris pointed out. There are 2 existing residences there, the McKinnons and the Garofanos. So we're entering into a maintenance agreement for Ivy Road. Actually, this week, we finalized the language with them on that easement agreement. I've provided that to their council for review, which they've already reviewed. So that should be in final form now. We've entered into, an understanding of how the road's going to be maintained going forward.
Okay, good.
And I would just also point out to Josh's question about, I think he was talking about the pillars to the carriage road. Just, one of the conditions on this is those pillars will be maintained.
So if that answers folks' questions, then if we could address, I think you may have covered a lot of the ground on the status of the incidental take permit. I don't know if you want to re-summarize that. And then the other, and Rick always adds to my understanding, but the easements and deeds restrictions and the status of that. So if you want to cover those 2 areas and whatever else is outstanding.
Again, it's the incidental take permit is the primary thing in our opinion. We, again, have been trying to follow up with DEC. Most recently on November 25th, they came back to us, after some delay with some very minor comments on one particular implementation agreement that John Overton is going to has actually already signed pursuant to that, it goes over the various requirements, including in connection with the Rattlesnake, a road crossing study that he's obligated to fund. They just had some minor wordsmithing on that. We made those wordsmithings, and John Overton has signed it, and we have provided that to DEC. And again, this afternoon, they basically confirmed, after some pressure, that they got the signed implementation agreement. They were just waiting confirmation. That's their last item that they need for a complete application. As Chris said, once the application is deemed complete, there's a brief notice period, and then hopefully we should be off to the races. In terms of the easement agreements, we've been working with your council over the past several months to come up with language. I believe we've revised most of the agreements, all the agreements, consistent with planning board council. If they're, we're happy to address any questions. As Chris say, most of these utility agreements concern just essentially giving various parties the right to either maintain or repair various utilities. It does not commit the village to repairing any of them, although it does give the village the right to maintain or repair some of that infrastructure. One of them is with the Tuxedo Park School, that again, we have entered into an agreement with them about how that would work. And again, I think those easement agreements and the declarations, I believe, should be in final form, if not very, very close to it.
And Rick, do you have any questions about where the status of the application is?
No, I think it's pretty clear. If Ashley has anything in particular with respect to the easements, she can raise it now. But I think generally, Dan is correct. There may have to be trying to clean up some dust in the corners, so to speak, on this issue, but basically it's all agreed to. Both of us, well, all three of us with Ashley and Dan and myself, agree on what these easements are supposed to be doing, but they're rather complicated given the cross easements involved and the fact that you can't give an easement to yourself. And so we've worked through a lot of those issues, and I believe they're just about ready, but I'll let Ashley weigh in on the easement part.
Sure. So, yeah, basically, I guess in principle, I mean, we have an agreement as to how they're all going to be structured. We have most of them. I think Dan, you provided a draft a few weeks ago of most of those utility easements. There's some final review. You provided some deed restrictions. I have to review those still as well. There was the cross easement for the road, the new road, the private road that's going to be created. That I know we have a working draft of as well. And the only other thing I think I'm not sure that I saw was the stormwater maintenance for the shared stormwater facilities. I just don't recall. It might have been a while ago, but we'll get with Dan, and we've been working through these issues as they come up, because again, like Rick said, they are very, very complicated. So to make sure everything's in order and going to who it needs to go to.
And if I could just add, the private road exists. What the applicant is talking about doing is improving the condition of the road. So it's an existing private road.
Significantly improving it.
Yes. Anybody have any questions about the status of the application final bits here? If not, if I could ask for, the applicant is back this evening for another, I assume 90 days extension to finish the outstanding items. And if I could ask for a motion to grant that 90 days.
Joanne, if I could weigh in
Okay.
for just a second with respect to it, as we typically do, for instance, if you wanted to have 90 days, that would bring you to March 9th of 2021. But you don't have a meeting on that night. The prior meeting is on February 24th. So if you miss the 24th, even though you technically had it, it would then expire. And then that runs into a problem as to whether or not they have to actually now apply for the subdivision approval again because it's already expired. So my
Right.
advice is always to try to renew it on the meeting before the 90 days that would expire. So to focus everybody's attention, to have it actually expire on that night, because then everybody remembers it rather than thinking that it's a little bit down the road. So I would suggest that it be extended to February 24th, 2021.
And can I have a motion on that?
Yeah, second.
And is everyone in favor?
Aye.
Yes,
Aye.
yes.
Okay, so I think that is, other than we have a review of one set of minutes, I think that is the only item of business before the board. So certainly everybody else doesn't have to stay while we do the minute review, but I wish everybody good holidays and Merry Christmas, and staying safe in this turbulent time.
And we just wanted to thank everyone and thank you for your time and wish you all the best and happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Thank
as
you
well.
for framing it for folks this evening.
Thank you.
Good night.
Take care, everybody. And
Joanne, you don't need me in this, right?
nope, I don't, not for the minute review. I think Portia and Josh can't vote on this, but if they could stay a little, I don't think we
Sure.
have any questions about the minutes, or does anybody have any questions about that set of minutes? If
September
not-
23rd.
If not, can I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
And a second? I'll second it, I guess. And are we all in favor of the minutes?
Yes.
Yes. Aye.
All right. Well, it's exciting to have a full complement back on the planning board. So we're thrilled that Josh and Portia are joining us. And it's the Overton situation, I think, is atypical in such a big subdivision. It's usually the next thing that we'll be looking at coming up in January is a single-family house on Tower Hill between the Hanson property and Hume Steyer's house. So there's going to be a new house there. So that property has been in front of the BZA and the bar, and once before in front of us. And so they'll be coming back to us for.
Just to chime in to underscore Joanne's comment that Overton is sort of an atypical application. This has been before the planning board since 2007.
Wow.
That's not all on us. That's the
Oh, no,
applicant
no, not at all.
picking it up and putting it down a few times.
The applicant has changed many consultants over the years, and the plan has changed a lot over the years, but it has gone through a long process.
And it's always tricky with the DEC. Having dealt with them, I mean,
Yes.
you guys might have heard a number of times that the application is not complete yet, which is how the DEC works, because there's statutory requirements for how long they have to approve an application
Interesting. Okay.
once it's complete. So you will spend a huge amount of time, I've been on the other side of this as well. You will spend a huge amount of time answering letters that say your application isn't complete. We want you to do this and that and prove this other thing. And then you get all their questions answered, and then they approve your application, or then they accept your application and usually approve it well within their statutory limit. They're always ahead of schedule because they've already done all the work before they've accepted your application.
Well, again, I wish, thank you, everybody. I wish everyone a wonderful holiday season and stay safe and well. And we'll get back on, I think in January, John will be back probably looking at the Pays' new home application.
Yes.
Do you know the date for January? at this
They
point?
are the second and fourth Wednesdays at 7:30.
And within the next 2 weeks, I'll be sending out a full calendar of all the meeting dates.
Okay, great, great.
So that's, and so obviously if we don't have an application, we don't have a meeting.
Right.
Okay. Well, be well. And as I say, it's very exciting to have a full planning board. So thanks so much for the work that everybody else has already done and for volunteering to help the village
Great.
with its work.
Great to meet
Motion
everyone.
to adjourn.
Thank you.
Good night, all.
Night all.
Good night.
Yep.
Night.
Thank you.
Good
Take
night, all.
care.